So this sentence now is teaching us the main lesson from what we've been discussing previously, right? So we've noted the connection between kibr, which is a person having pride and arrogance, and shirk, falling into shirk by necessity. So he then says, after all of that, the heart will never be able to become free of all of the creation, right? So the heart will never be able to be free of need, free of reliance, free of dependence, free of attachment, free of captivation, free of enslavement, right? From all of the creation, except by what? Except by what? Then he goes on to mention all those things in which lies the freedom of the heart, right? From the rest of the creation. What are those things? He said that Allah should be its master, its Lord, the one that it does not worship except He, right? So Allah alone is its Lord and master that it worships, and that aid is not sought except by Him. You do not seek aid except by Him, and nor is reliance made except upon Him. Tawakkul is only upon Him. Nor does the heart rejoice except with what Allah loves and is pleased with, right? Because many people, their heart's rejoicement is not with what Allah loves and is pleased with, it's by other things, right? Which will make it captivated to those other things. Nor does it dislike except what is hated by the Lord and disliked by Him. Nor does it show loyalty except for the one to whom Allah gives loyalty. Nor does it show enmity except for the one to whom Allah shows enmity. Nor does it love except for the sake of Allah, loving for the sake of Allah. Nor does it hate anything except for the sake of Allah. Nor does it give except for the sake of Allah. Nor does it withhold except for the sake of Allah. Right, so you've seen all these qualities have been described here. I'll mention them again. Firstly, Allah is the one that is worshipped and who is the master. Aid is not sought except by way of Him. Reliance is not made except upon Him. It does not rejoice or be happy except by what Allah loves and is pleased with. It does not dislike except what Allah hates and dislikes. It does not show loyalty except to whom Allah shows loyalty. It does not show disloyalty or enmity except to whom Allah shows disloyalty and shows enmity. And then it loves only for the sake of Allah, hates only for the sake of Allah, gives only for the sake of Allah, and withholds for the sake of Allah. Right? 11 things mentioned here. All right. So when the heart is like this, when these are the traits and the qualities of the heart, this is what will make the heart free of need, free of attachment, right? You will not be enslaved to anything besides Allah Azza wa Jal. Neither wealth, nor fame, nor authority, nor any kind of, relationships that a person might have. The heart will not be attached or enslaved to anything besides Allah Azza wa Jal. And then Ibn Taymiyyah said at the end of this, فَكُلَّمَا قَوِيَ إِخْلَاصُ دِينِهِ لِلَّهِ كَمُلَتْ عُبُودِيَّتُهُ وَاسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنِ الْمَخْلُوقَاتِ. Every time the sincerity in religion increases, right? So every time he's greater in his sincerity in religion, then his ubudiyah, his servitude, his enslavement to Allah will also increase. And his freedom from the creation will also increase. He will be less in need of the creation, of the creatures. And by perfecting his servitude to Allah through this perfection, does he free himself from pride, from kibr and shirk. Right? Kibr and shirk, pride and arrogance and shirk are connected. These two are by necessity tied to each other. So how would you free yourself from both of these things? It is by what has been mentioned here, these like 11 things that were mentioned, and ikhlas. So the more you are enslaved to Allah by way of this worship, then you are truly freeing yourself from enslavement to other things. And by way of that, do you then free yourself also from pride, arrogance, and likewise shirk? Because those two things are binding, right? Those two things are binding. So Shaykh al-Fawzan, he comments upon this, and particularly the last sentence, that by the perfection of servitude to Allah, does he become free and innocent of al-kibr and al-shirk, of arrogance and the shirk. So Shaykh al-Fawzan says, when a person, he makes his worship purely and sincerely only for Allah Azza wa Jal alone, he then becomes liberated. He liberates himself from shirk. And he liberates himself from arrogance. Right? He liberates himself from arrogance. And he liberates himself from shirk. And he then becomes an abdan mukhlisan lillahi azza wa jal. He then becomes a sincere servant of Allah azza wa jal. And thereupon Allah shows loyalty to him and aids him and extends his support and help to him. And, he gives him the good end in this life and the hereafter. Right? So this is the type of person who now, he is completely free and not in need of anything from the creation. He is captivated, enslaved only to Allah Azza wa Jal. And then the Shaykh mentions the verse in the Quran, Man kana yuridu al-izzata falillahi al-izzatu jami'a. Whoever desires honor, then to Allah belongs all honor and might. إِلَيْهِ يَسْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. To him ascends the goodly word, and the righteous deed he raises it up. وَالَّذِينَ يَمْكُرُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَكْرُ أُولَٰئِكَ هُوَ يَبُورٌ. And as for those who plot evil, then they will have a severe punishment, and the plot of those people, will fail, will perish. And also the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَكِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. To Allah belongs the honor and the might, and to His Messenger, and to the believers, but the hypocrites do not know. Right, so the point behind all of this then is that Ibn Taymiyyah has shown that the way a servant escapes arrogance and its necessity, which is shirk, because these two are binding to each other, arrogance and shirk and arrogance, they are tied to each other. The way a servant exonerates himself and liberates himself from falling into any of this, is by way of the things that were mentioned, which is basically, becoming enslaved to Allah, captivated by Allah, being an abd of Allah, with all of the meanings of that statement that we've been discussing in this treatise so far, right? Singling Him out in worship, being loyal to Him, being pleased by what pleases Him, being angered by what angers Him, right? Loyal to Him and disloyal, loving for His sake, hating Him. All of those things together, they free you from enslavement to others, because they make you a perfect slave of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, the shirk that we are speaking of, the shirk that emanates from arrogance, which comes from arrogance, or which arrogance leads to, and just shirk on its own. Ibn Taymiyyah says, وَالشِّرْكُ غَالِبٌ عَلَى النَّصَارَى وَالْكِبْرُ غَالِبٌ عَلَى الْيَهُودِ. Shirk is predominant among the Christians, and al-kibr, which is arrogance, is predominant among the Yahud. Right? So even though these two things are binding, right, arrogance by necessity leads to shirk, and where there is arrogance, meaning in the underlying principle of religion, right, someone who refuses to worship Allah Azza wa Jal, right, by necessity he will be a mushrik, right, even if he's an atheist, right, an atheist will by necessity be a mushrik in that respect. We discussed that in the previous lesson. So even though these two things are binding, we see that in some people, in some creeds, shirk is overwhelming, right, is the predominant thing. And in another people, arrogance will be the predominant thing. Right? So Shaykh al-Fawzan comments upon this paragraph, upon this sentence. And so he says that these two things are binding, shirk and arrogance. However, in certain nations, one of them can actually overwhelm the other.